Hello, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say. And today I'm feeling a little off. I'm gonna be a little bit honest. This is the first time that I'm sitting down to record a video and I kind of have no plan. I don't like that feeling. I don't like doing that. But it's just because the books that I read for this week are so, for lack of a better term, they just leave you with, like, they suck out so much feeling and thought process that, like, coming down to, like, actually record this video, I'm like, there's nothing left. My brain cells have clocked out for the week. So, as I've already said in some of my previous videos, this is July, and July, if you didn't know, is Disability Pride Month. Yay! So this month I decided that I was going to try to read as many books from my collection that I had that focused on people with disabilities. So I thought, what better book to start with than the one, the only, A Silent Voice. Full disclosure, I have watched the movie. I actually watched the movie before I knew it was like a full-on manga. And oh my god, I only have volume 1, but I did read, okay, so I was able to get the manga on Libby, which I was like, interesting, okay. I didn't know that they made that available. So I got to read volumes 2, 4, and 6. It was really weird. My library didn't have volumes 3 or volumes 5, and right now I'm working on volume 7. I thought that there was so much like good stuff in just this first volume, and from my informed knowledge from the movie, that I thought I would just get into this right now. So as a spoiler-free summary, which if you haven't read the manga or if you haven't watched the movie, you're missing out. Let me just tell you right now. Okay, so Silent Voice follows our main character, Shouya Ishida. That's this boy right here on the cover. Shouya is in elementary school when the story starts, at least this first novel. And he's kind of a daredevil, and he's got his group of friends, and they're all cool. They're a bunch of little hellraisers, I will say. At the start of their elementary school year, they have a new student coming, which is Shoko, and she's on the front cover as well, if you can see her. Shoko Nishimiya has just transferred to their school, and as she's making her introduction on the first day, they find out that she is deaf. So as she's trying to fit in and get more accustomed to her new routine at school, she starts getting bullied by Shouya and his friends. And it gets to a point where he is actually kind of blamed for everything that's happened to her, and he gets in trouble from his teachers as well as his classmates. Everyone eventually turns on him, and his past friends are now bullying him. So as Shouya grows up and kind of moves on from elementary school to middle school and then eventually to high school, this rumor that he is a bully has followed him throughout all these years. So now he is in high school, and he's decided that he wants to make amends with Shoko, so he seeks her out and apologizes for his past behaviors. The story follows their growing friendship and as he makes amends with his past friends. It's an overall story of forgiveness, and it examines the way that guilt and shame can affect us as we grow up. I will say right now that summary I just gave is not good. It doesn't even encompass everything that is in this novel, so just know that I only gave you a very intentionally very small snippet of everything that is in this novel. But if you want to read it, I highly encourage you do so. At the very least, watch the movie. The movie is really good. But I didn't say everything because I have to first disclose a massive trigger warning. So the contents of this book does cover topics such as suicide, suicidal ideation, abuse, and bullying. So if you are sensitive to any of those topics, please feel free to click off this video, or you can kind of come back towards my analysis portion. I'll try to include a part where it's safe to kind of come back. Otherwise, you can click off this video. You can still check out the movie or the manga if you are up for it. Again, I highly recommend it. It's a really good examination of all these topics. So it can be very triggering, but it's also like purposeful in the examination of these topics. So just giving that disclosure now. And as always, major spoilers for the entire series going forward. So if you don't want to know, click off this video. I don't know what you're doing here, but you should head out now if you actually want to know what happens on your own time. If not, continue the video as normal. And with that, let's get on with the rest of the video. So as you can see, I did bookmark some portions of this book because this first novel is like, it's something we can analyze just in and of itself. Just this one, I don't know how many pages it is, just this one book has so many things we can talk about that pertain to the overall message of the whole story. So I just wanted to kind of focus on this first one. Again, I did read some of the other volumes. I didn't finish the entire series, and I have watched the movie. So some of my analyses about this first book are informed by the stuff that we talk about more later on in the story. But I just want to start with this first because this is the one that I have a physical copy of. So getting into the story. After Shoko starts off in the new school year, the bullying isn't like immediate. This is a very big shock to the students, not just Shouya and his friends, but to the entire class, because up till this point, for, all intents and purposes, they have not had any experiences with people that are deaf and or people with disabilities. So it's a very big adjustment, as they have to learn that if they want to communicate with Shoko, they have to write in her notebook. If they want to get her attention, they have to tap on her. She can't necessarily speak or enunciate the way that they can. A really big point of contention for the other students is when they're having their choir lessons and she can't sing as well as they can because she can't hear herself, obviously. So for these kids, there's a lot of adjustments going on to their normal routines, and it does cause a lot of tension between them. It also causes tension in the classroom because as the teacher is giving instruction to the students, Shoko has to turn to the people around her to ask what he's saying. And as these students are trying to help her, they're also missing out on what the teacher's saying, so their learning is compromised in a kind of way. So it's just a lot of points in which frustration is growing and growing between the students and their relationship with Shoko. And it is this buildup of frustration and tension between Shoko and her classmates that eventually leads to what we can only call is lighthearted bullying that will eventually turn into full-on abuse and violence. So it starts with Shouya trying to test whether or not she's actually deaf by screaming in her ear, which it's helpful to note that Shoko wears a hearing aid, so she's probably not entirely deaf, and she can at the very least feel the vibration. And especially if someone is right in your ear, right where you have a hearing aid that is meant to amplify the sounds around you so that you can hear it, and having him scream right next to it, she heard it. I can guarantee you she heard it. So he does this frequently throughout the story, and this is like where it starts out as he's doing this. And I bring this up because I wanted to note specifically his teacher's reaction. So when he reprimands Shouya, he says, "I realize you've never met anyone who couldn't hear before, but you can't make fun of Nishimiya because of her disability." And he says, "I just wanted to know if she really couldn't hear." And his response is, "Then go about it differently. Ask Nishimiya directly." This first volume is full of interactions like that between him and his teacher, where he is directly bullying Nishimiya, and when his teacher is reprimanding him, he's not really trying to model any kind of better behavior, and he's not really addressing the root cause of the issue. Because if you ask anyone that's actually like a really big fan of A Silent Voice, everyone hates this teacher, and with good reason. Another like really big moment that I bookmarked in the story, I'm gonna read it now. Let me scoot this over for a second. So if you watch the movie, I think the scene plays out a little bit differently, but the way that it goes on in the manga series is that they bring in Shoko's teacher. She's a teacher that works with Shoko directly, but she goes to their class and proposes an idea for everyone to learn a little bit of sign language so that it'll be easier for them to communicate with Shoko. When she suggests this, their homeroom teacher asks her if she knows sign language, and she says no. And I want to note, because this is like a motif that comes up very frequently throughout the entire series, is the idea of like starting, that you can make a change starting today if you choose to. So she suggests that they all learn together, including the teachers, and he asks her, "Do you not know sign language?" And she says no. She specifically says, "Which is why I thought I would start learning today." And his response is, "You're not embarrassed making the students learn something you don't know yourself?" So this conversation initially starts because Naoka, one of the other friend groups that is involved in the bullying with Shouya, is complaining about having to learn sign language and saying that it's inconvenient for her to do so. And the teacher, after bringing up the fact that she doesn't actually know sign language, says that he can understand why she's complaining, and he says no one will go along with this. And I think we can kind of, as a collective, agree that as a teacher, you're supposed to be modeling a certain behavior for your students. If you tell them hey, no one's going to go along with this, no one's going to want to learn sign language, then you are inherently, indirectly, making it okay for your students to refuse to make accommodations to make another student feel more comfortable. Which is just like so interesting to think about, because like this teacher in retrospect was not asking them to learn the entirety of sign language, but was just asking like, just signs every now and then that you can use like in a like pinch, honestly, because there are so many like basic signs that you could learn that would just make a conversation so much easier between you and someone that uses sign language predominantly. The fact that he even said that and used it as a reason for the other students to continue alienating her, baffling. I don't get it. Because side note, I don't know if you guys unlocked this lore about me. I actually took a class in sign language one time, so I do know a little bit. I know how to sign my name. Kristen. Oh, my name, I'm sorry, is Chris. I can't spell. I misspelled my own name. Oh my God. It stems from a disconnect that we have in, our real world between people with disabilities and people without disabilities. Where if you don't have a disability, you often don't see how the world around you can be inherently inaccessible to people with disabilities. For example, there is a crosswalk in downtown Chicago. I'm pretty sure it's the corner of State Street and Jackson, where that crosswalk will actually have like an announcement if it's safe to cross. A voice at each crosswalk light will announce if it's okay for you to cross. And if you're someone that doesn't necessarily need that accommodation, you don't understand to the fullest extent how that can be so much more accessible to someone who does need that accommodation. I had a project in college and I made a whole TikTok account dedicated to it. It only had 3 videos, but I went around my campus to handicapped bathrooms to test if they actually were accessible to people with disabilities. And honestly, it's not something that you think about until you actually have to sit down and think about it. One of the biggest things that like I noticed is that oftentimes these bathrooms were advertised, or like they had the placard that said that they were wheelchair accessible, but then they don't even have like a button to open the door. You have to like physically use a handle to open the door. And these doors were not light, like they were heavy. Even I struggled to open them, and I don't have any kind of like physical disability, and I was struggling. Oftentimes, even like the faucets or the soap dispensers, they were not automatic, so you had to like press buttons. They were really high up off the ground, so you couldn't even really reach them hypothetically if you were sitting in a wheelchair. And these are all things that like me and so many people are fortunate enough to have never had to think about when going into a bathroom, which is why it's so important for us to become aware of these differences and of these gaps that exist in our world, and try to figure out a way in which we can make our world more accessible to people. So becoming aware, and as an adult modeling for younger generations what to look out for and how you can help other people, is crucial. And the fact that this teacher is not doing it is a big part of the problem. Because despite the fact that, Shouya does bully Shoko very heavily and like physically hits her, it's awful. It's objectively bad what he's doing. But it also forces you as like a reader to kind of examine the fact that these still are children. They're people that are trying to navigate the world, and as we know psychologically, they're trying to find their sense of self and how they fit into the world around them. So that's why as adults, it's really crucial for us to be modeling certain behaviors and teaching children what is right and what is wrong, which is what makes the climax and the turning point in this book so crucial to the overall narrative. So there's a point in the story where Shoko's mom goes to the school to complain that I think it was like 8 or something of her hearing aids had been lost or destroyed. The teacher and the principal go to talk to the school because they know who's been bullying her and they know who's behind it, but they want to give that person a chance to fess up to what they've done. And I can't take credit for this analysis because I did see some other videos from other people that were specifically looking over the movie. But in this scene, they're talking about the potential consequences for the bullying of Shoko. And in the manga panels, you can see that Shouya is about to raise his hand to kind of fess up and own up to what he's done. He's feeling guilty, and despite knowing that he's going to get in trouble, he wants to own up to his actions. But before he even can, the teacher immediately slams the whiteboard and yells at Ishida. He says, "Stand up, Ishida. We all know it was you, you little twerp." So in this moment, we see him face mass rejection from the adults in the situation to his own friends. The people that were prior to this encouraging this behavior and laughing at everything that he was doing to Shoko have now turned their backs on him and are putting all the blame on him as an individual. We see Shouya try to deflect and say that even the teacher understood that he was feeling frustrated and understood his feelings in the situation, and that the girls were bullying Shoko more than he was. But it is to no avail. Shouya is scapegoated for the entire incident, and shortly after this, he is the new target of the bullying from his own friends. When his mom finds out about what happens, she even says that he's so pathetic. So again, this mass rejection is very crucial to his character development. Specifically, and again, I'm kind of borrowing this from someone else's analysis. I will be linking that video so you can go watch that whole thing, but it switches this situation where he has done something bad and he's feeling guilty about it to him feeling shame. It's no longer that he has done something bad, but that he is a bad person. And feeling this mass rejection causes him to lash out. He's still being aggressive towards Shoko and not accepting her help in any kind of way. Later on in the story, we also see something very similar that happened to Shoko happen to Shouya when his shoes start going missing. We find out that his used to be friends have been stealing his shoes and throwing them away every day. When his mom starts to notice, she offers to talk to the teacher, which at first he doesn't want to do, but eventually Mr. Takeuchi does find out about what's been happening to his shoes. Shouya comes clean and says that he thinks someone is throwing away his shoes, and his teacher responds by saying, "Don't lie, tell me the truth." Shouya is very insistent, saying that he thinks his two friends are the ones that are stealing his shoes every day, and his teacher responds by saying, "I see. Then let's pretend that those two are stealing your shoes. Let's pretend it's the truth. You're still the one who started it, aren't you? What right does the boy who bullied Shoko have to judge his friends? I did warn you, didn't I, over and over again, that what happens is your responsibility." Now, this scene is very important to the overall narrative because it shows Shouya that there is a certain amount of revenge that his friends are able to enact on him for his actions, that there is a certain debt that he has to pay for what he's done in the past. And worst of all, that the only way that he can make amends and that he can finally be absolved for his actions is to pay in his own suffering. It's also interesting to note that at the start of the story, there's a similar incident that happens to Shouya where his shoes are stolen, and they're specifically stolen by this kid that's like much bigger than him, and we see him fight his way out of that scenario. But when the same thing happens to him later, after he is being bullied for bullying Shoko, he's not fighting back. And the reason he's not fighting back is because he believes that he deserves it. And the reason that this is so detrimental to him as a person is because it neglects to recognize that the only way that you can be absolved of your actions is to get forgiveness. The only person that can absolve you is the person you've wronged. At no point throughout the story does anyone tell Shouya that he should apologize to Shoko. And it is this mass rejection from all of his peers and the adults in his life that force him into the person he is today. Someone that is full of shame and in turn rejects other people so that they can't reject him again. He isolates himself from any human interaction because he believes that that is what he deserves. And worst of all, he believes that the world will be a better place if he's not in it. This first book in the series perfectly sets up who we know Shouya Ishida to be when the rest of the series continues. He is full of self-loathing. He believes himself to be a bad person that is irredeemable in the eyes of his peers. He isolates himself because he believes that that is what he deserves and that he is unworthy of things like fun, happiness, joy, and friendship, which is what makes the rest of the novel so much more impactful because it shows us that, yes, there are people that do bad things and, maybe there are bad people, but we can always start again. We can always make a change as long as we know when to start and we actually choose to start somewhere. And this whole series really forces us to come to terms with that idea as we are forced, from the reader's perspective, to forgive all the other people that were involved in this incident. From the reader's perspective, as we see what happens with Shouya, it's easy for us to forgive him because we're seeing him from a much more holistic standpoint. We've seen his suffering, we're seeing things from his perspective, and we see how much he hates himself for the things he did as a child. When we are reintroduced to Shouya's friend group, now grown up, it's much harder for us to forgive them because we hold the same resentment that Shouya feels towards them. Specifically, characters like Naoka and Miki that put a lot of the blame on him when they were children. It's hard for us to see past that, especially as we meet Naoko and she's still very hostile and aggressive towards Shoko. But it's done intentionally. It's meant to challenge us and challenge our beliefs in this overall message that is being portrayed in this book, which is that people can change. People may do bad things, but it doesn't necessarily make them bad people. In volume 6 of the manga, it's really interesting because at this point, spoilers, I guess, Shouya is in the hospital and Shoko is feeling immense guilt and shame for the pain that she's caused him. To try and make amends and make up for the things that she's done in the past, which, you know, personally it's still hard for me to like get down with the fact that she thinks she's guilty for anything, but that's a personal thing. She's reconnecting with his friends, now in this instance without him. And we are getting perspective chapters from these characters and we get a more holistic view of who they are. We see their guilt, their shame, the things that they carry in this friendship that they have with Shouya and Shoko. And this volume, even though, you know, like it's not necessarily from Shoko's perspective, it's very heavily dominated by her emotions. After Shouya is in the hospital and he's in a coma, we're forced to kind of like confront these feelings that we have about these characters. There is a lot of anger as we see characters like Naoko confront Shoko and she's hitting her and blaming her for what happened to Shouya. But we see all of this anger quickly unravel, and behind it we see all these characters and all the shame and guilt that they themselves carry. And more importantly, we see that Shoko is still pushing forward and trying to make amends with each and every one of them. So it forces us as the reader to confront our own anger and aggression towards them and ask ourselves why we can't forgive them. And trust me, Naoko is a very hard character to sympathize for and a very hard character to forgive for all the things that she's done. But as with every novel, it's purely intentional. It's meant to challenge us and force us to really reflect on our own ways of thinking, who we believe is redeemable and who we believe is not. And this is a scene from the movie. Again, I haven't really finished the volume of the manga. We see that all these characters are capable of change and they are capable of taking that step. Even characters like Naoko. Have I been calling her Naoko? It's Naoka. I'm sorry, her name is Naoka Ueno and I just shortened it to Naoko. I'm so sorry. I think I messed that up for like the last few minutes. My bad. At the school festival, we see that Naoka has learned a little bit of sign language, even though she only did so to insult Shoko. But it shows that she is taking that step, even if it's like, you know, not inherently very nice. She's making an effort to communicate better with Shoko. Naoka's character arc is very gradual, and just from this scene, we see that she is taking that first step, which is what the whole story has been trying to communicate to us from the very beginning, that that first step is the most important, and it's the most crucial to getting along this path of forgiveness and true change. So as much as this story is one about bullying, consequences, and the bad things that we do as humans, it is also a story of forgiveness, understanding, and learning to communicate with others. Because human communication is not so simply defined. It is not one language, one touch, or one gesture. It goes beyond all of those things. And sometimes it's hard for us to connect with others because there's a language barrier. There's something that we don't understand about the other person, which is what this story is trying to tell us. That if we make the effort, if we can take the leap into understanding one another, then we can have joy and happiness and connection. And that we as humans are ever changing and we are not always set in one way of living, and we can always make amends and become new versions of ourselves, better versions of ourselves, if even that. And with that, that's the end of the video. I really want to rewatch the movie. I think I might after all this, but first and foremost, I have to get a hold of those other volumes that for some reason was not available on Libby. I really don't understand why they weren't. I'm confused. Truly. I tried really hard to be like cool and inspirational. I don't know if I really landed that. Hopefully I did. Again, this is one of those books. There's a few books that I felt like this. They both die at the end, made me feel like that. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, which I haven't recorded the video for yet, and I think I might wait so I could really ruminate on that. It's just one of those books where you just have to like read it and sit with it. You understand everything, but you also understand nothing. What's that one quote? The only thing I know is I know nothing. Something like that. Yeah, that's what this book makes me feel. Oops. Sorry. I think that's the end of the video. I always do that. I'm so stupid. I have a lot of big feelings, and I don't really know how to interpret all those big feelings, but I'm gonna try. If anyone wants me to watch the movie after finishing this, let me know. I will definitely review it and connect it much more intelligently back to the actual volumes. I think that would be really fun. But if no one wants me to do it, then I won't. I'll do it in my free time, like normal people. Got a Will Eisner Comic Industry Awards. No, it was a nominee. It didn't win. Definitely check out A Silent Voice. There are 7 volumes in the entire series, and as I already mentioned, there's a movie. The movie cinematically is really good. Like, I'm not a film bro, but I get it. Like, I get it. The art is really good. I wish I could like really show you everything that's in here. It's really good. I highly recommend reading this. I couldn't find any socials for the author, so I'm so sorry. And of course, you can always follow me on all my social media at Variations of Listen to Kristen on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter now. Overall, you know I have to give this a 5 out of 5. It's like a classic. If you're like an anime / manga fan and you haven't read and or watched A Silent Voice, get out. This is definitely like one of those things that like everyone's watched and you just have to watch. Like it's required by law. So I definitely think you should. Without further ado, that's the end of the video. So I am going to, I might actually just rewatch the movie for funsies. I don't know if that's like a crazy thing to do to like get myself depressed on a Sunday, but I'm open to it. That's it. I have some things to go do now. Cool. I'm done. Bye.